Even now we don't to some extent, but at least we've managed to find our bearings somewhere. Before COVID, we were telling our students to shut down their mobile phones or to put them into silent mode and not bring them out in the class. Post COVID, we've had to run our classes through their mobile phones. So that is the reality of our situation today. We who used to use chalk and duster and maybe the occasional PPT have been forced to adopt electronic online methods of teaching and try and be as innovative as possible to make it easier for the students to understand. Of course, it has taken a lot of effort for us to make this transition, and I should say that it is good that we have taken up this new area and adapted to it. Because, as a famous quote by Stewart Brand says, once a new technology rolls over you, if you're not part of the steamroller, you're part of the road. So, thankfully, we pharmacy educators have decided that we don't want to be part of the road, we would rather be the steamroller, and we've taken up this role. So, I was quite curious to know about how teachers all across the country are coping with this situation of a new situation. So I decided to run a small survey, and I'm sure many of you would have got this form through your WhatsApp or emails, and it sought to it sought to capture the experiences of teaching pharmacy teachers in India during this pandemic. I cannot claim to have reached the whole of India. That's probably my personal limitation, but through whatever means I had, I've got responses, 151 responses from the states of Karnataka, mainly Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, and a few also from Himachal Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh. So when I took a look at the responses that we received, the number of respondents were equally distributed among the male and the female staff. So we have equal representation of the men and women teachers. Coming to their age, most of them were in the 25 to 35 group, followed closely by the 36 to 45 years age group. In terms of years of teaching experience, the heartening feature here is that the ones who have between 1 to 5 years of experience and 6 to 10 years of experience, the darker blue and the red color put together, they make up almost 50% of our respondents. When I asked about what are the teaching methods that they have been using so far, they told me that the most common one that I found was sharing notes through email or WhatsApp or Google Classroom. And equally common was making use of platforms like Zoom or WebEx or Google Meetings for online classes. Also, they were using WhatsApp audio lectures, some few of them. Google Classroom was being used by a few teachers, and some of them took to sharing links of videos or tutorials about their topics. Additional methods that people mentioned in their comments were, somebody said call facility. I'm not really sure of what this means. Probably they call up the students and talk to them. I don't really know how teaching can happen in that situation, but probably I'm not sure what they meant. Somebody created a YouTube channel with all their lectures. This is a very innovative thing, and it can stand us in good stead for the future times to come when we may have to rely on online teaching. Some people use podcasts. Some people use something called as Callpoll. Now, this I've understood is a paid service. It's a digital campus and learning management system wherein you can have all your lectures uploaded onto the college website. And if you have that particular software and you've made use of that program, then your students can view their lectures there. You can do your testing and evaluations also there. So there have been people who've used that platform. Somebody said they've made videos of themselves teaching and sent that to the students. Some people have used Hangout Meets, which is nothing but a version of this Google Meet. Microsoft Teams has also been used by some people, and some said that they recorded PowerPoint classes and made use of those. When it comes, I had also asked a question about practical teaching, laboratory teaching. The majority of people said that they had not yet started teaching practicals online. Now, this is an issue that we have to think about. Quite a few of them said they had already completed whatever was due to be taught for this semester or year before the lockdown. Some of them said that they have explained the experiment during an online class and they have sent the content, what has to be written, into the practical record to the students using email or WhatsApp. Now, there were quite a few people who also said that I do not think it is possible to teach practicals online. And this is a very pertinent issue because it may be possible to some extent for us to teach practicals online. I can show them a demonstration, I can send a video of how something is done. But whether the students are going to be able to pick up the skills that we hope to teach them. When a student does an experiment, he is expected to learn certain skills by doing it. Now that will not be possible online. So there were many people who said that it is not possible to teach practicals online. There were some people who sent links to laboratory experiment videos related to their subjects. This is another option that we have. And some people, probably the PharmD or the clinical people, clinical pharmacy scenario faculty said that they were doing case presentations through Google Meet. When it comes to assessment or evaluation, my findings were that most commonly people were making use of online tests or quiz. Some people were also using a home-based test, which they would monitor through Zoom or WebEx or Google Meeting. So you have the student write the test and you will watch him doing it. The student has to keep his video and audio on and you will watch him doing it. Then there were people who conducted open book tests. There were some people who did home-based tests without monitoring. And a few people said they have not yet started any kind of assessment or evaluation. There were people who made use of these methods also. There were somebody using Google Forms. There was somebody who was using Google Classroom. People were conducting online Viva. Assignments were being given out and corrected. Solving old question papers, asking students to go through the old question papers. These were some additional methods. When it came to the response from students to online teaching, what was their response? The teachers felt that it was at least 47% of the teachers said that the response was good. And another 37% said that it was satisfactory. So that means that we are quite happy with the way our students have responded to online teaching. When we asked about how teachers are finding online teaching during this pandemic, it was a mixed bag of responses. There were some people who said it is very easy. There were some who said it was somewhat difficult. But the majority was made up of people who said that it was somewhat easy, along with neither easy nor difficult. That means that most people have managed to cope with online teaching, although it was a new thing that was thrust upon us. When we asked about how you feel taking online classes from home, I'm sure all of us who are working in private colleges, our managements will be very happy because most of them said that they are neither relaxed nor stressed. If you're too stressed, sometimes you can't perform your job properly. And if you're too relaxed, then also you will kind of slack off and you will be lazy and not do your work. So it's a heartening sign that we've had 43% people saying that they are neither relaxed nor stressed. And there were a mix of the other reactions. We have to take the good and the bad that comes along with this pandemic and changing over to this system of medicine. So when I asked teachers about what they thought was the best thing about teaching online during the lockdown, a very good thing was 45% of them said that the best thing about the pandemic is I get time to attend online conferences. So this shows that during our normal routines, working routines, we are actually not having time to develop our own knowledge and skills. But because of this facility that we are at home, we get to, and we are getting to schedule our online classes in a different way, we get time to build our own knowledge base. And quite a few of them also said that the teaching, that blue 32%, what you can see, they said that my teaching has improved by making use of online resources. So that is a very good thing also. So it shows that we are adapting and trying to get information from a lot of sources. The biggest issue that teachers said they faced in relation to online teaching is half of them almost said that they miss face-to-face communication with students. So that drives home the fact that how important it is. We may not realize the value of it when we were doing it, but now that we are not in the classroom, we don't get to see our students. So we kind of miss the presence of our students. Even if it was that there were few naughty guys sitting around and, you know, cracking jokes or talking and laughing in the middle, you tend to miss that because now the connect has become very less. Now, there were a few teachers who also said that they don't like the fact that they can't draw diagrams or structures. That's probably the chemistry people. There were people who said that they can't teach the practical part, and that is what was worrying them. And some people said that the flow of teaching gets interrupted because if you have a, we are all obviously using the free version of Zoom or whatever. So if there's a time limit, then you have to cut the session and you have to go back and log in again, and that kind of breaks your connectivity, breaks the flow of your teaching. So these were some of the issues. Now, when it comes to how students and teachers, it turned out that the biggest problem for both categories was probably technology. That has proved to be the great leveler because teachers said the major technical issue I face with online teaching is that 49% blue thing that you can see there. I have internet connectivity issues. And when I asked the teachers about what they felt from their experience, that the main issue from students' point of view, there also about 53% of them said that all students don't have stable internet connection, and that is the biggest technical issue that they face with this kind of a situation. When I asked about what were the innovative steps that people had taken, it's a fact, and most people said that conducting online classes itself is an innovative step, which is very true because we have been steeped in the old methods of doing our classes, the conventional way of teaching, and taking to an entirely online system of teaching has been the biggest innovation for most of us. There were some people who did mention a few of their initiatives, which can be of value to all of us. Maybe we can take a leaf out of this book. Some people said they started their own YouTube channel. There was somebody who said that they got students to do self-evaluation. A student writes the test and then he or she corrects the test himself. So that's a good idea also. You get your children get to the students get to go a little deeper into the topic and see where they went wrong and evaluate for themselves. Then there were some people. I'm sorry, is somebody trying to say something in the middle?
No,
Students,
no,
yeah,
you can continue.
yeah. I hope I'm audible, sir. Okay. There were a few student teachers who asked students to do presentations using Zoom or other media, questioning during the class, using flowcharts and diagrams, using mind maps for better understanding, and using case studies. These are a few of the innovative steps that people have been trying to use to make sure that their lessons get taken in the proper way. So once we've seen all these aspects of what exactly is happening and how things are going on, how everybody is coping, I put together a few suggestions for how we can deal with the change better. Whatever we've been doing so far, we have done it as a kind of a sudden response, and we don't know whether we were doing it well or not. Now we've had time to, evaluate and take care of our responses, and we can design and plan our system better so that we can do things in a more, systematic manner for better learning outcomes. I want to discuss these suggestions under different headings. Firstly, for better learning outcomes, what we ought to be doing is we ought to plan and design a series of activities, that could consist of different aspects of the learning process. Like there was somebody who was talking about what is called as a DEAR instructional model: discover, explore, apply, and reflect. So if you have activities for all these, like say you send them materials in the form of reading material or a video or a PPT. So the students will spend some time doing that. That will be the discover phase. Then as they go through the material and they try to learn it, they will be exploring what they are doing. Then you do some kind of a testing where you will check if they are able to apply the knowledge that they have gained. And then finally you have another session at the end as a close the loop kind of activity where the students will be able to reflect on what they have learned. So if you have a series of activities, please look at the last point on the presentation. Schedule each of these activities for 1 or 2 days of the week. So maybe you can have them reading and learning for 2 days. Then you have them doing the testing, actually studying the matter for 1 day, testing for 1 day, and you're closing the loop kind of lectures for another day. So that way, the entire 6 days in a week, students know what is to be expected. So if you do it in this way, they are also better prepared to learn what you're trying to teach them. Now, whenever these activities and these things you are doing, you must make use of a combination of both synchronous and asynchronous methods. Synchronous methods are the ones that happen in real time, and asynchronous are the ones where a time lag is allowed. So, like for example, if I'm running a Zoom session, I need my students to be online at that time. That is an example of a synchronous session. If I do something like, say, I record a lecture or I prepare a PPT or a video and I send it to the students to watch in their own time, then that is an asynchronous method. So it's been found that generally using a combination of both these methods works best from the student's point of view. Then many times we feel that we are not able to give attention to all the students who've logged into a session. So it would be good to, split up the group into smaller, the entire class into smaller groups, and have sessions where you have something like a discussion. This is actually part of what is called as a flipped classroom. So a normal conventional classroom is when students learn in the classroom in college, and they go home and they try to apply what we have taught them, and or they may be doing homework and things like that. Now the flipped classroom is when you turn this concept or this scenario on its head. So you have them learning at home, and when they come to class they apply whatever they have learned. So this, what we can do, as what I told you about giving them material to get prepared and then having discussions. This is an example of how you can run a flipped classroom. So give them material which they will go through and get them back to discuss, and maybe you will question them, maybe they will discuss with each other, maybe they will do a group discussion and one of them will present what they felt. So these are the kind of things you can do in a flipped classroom. When it comes to tests, try and make your questions such that they become less Googleable. Now, Google is the biggest guru, bigger than all of us sitting here listening to this seminar. So, students will rely on Google for getting the answers to your tests. So, if you ask them questions in an indirect way, if you give them case studies where they have to apply their mind, if you give them other application based questions, what happens is it is more likely that they can't directly copy answers from somewhere. We are not able to monitor them fully, and we know that they will probably try and take the easy way out sometimes. So make your test such that they don't get to do that, they don't get away with it. So of course there has to be a balance, because ultimately we want to test what the students know and not just prove our panditya or the fact that I know so much. Make it a balanced kind of a test so that you are testing what they have actually learned. There are a lot of online testing tools that we can use. Google Forms people have been using already. You can conduct a quiz or an online test through it. You set a time frame, say you return it to me within this time. Exam.net is one of the offerings from, I think, Sweden. Edmodo is another one. Testmos. They are all testing tools which give you a lot of options. You can design your test the way you want it to be. You can set time frames for delivery of the answers. You can then do your grading, and you can have a clear a graphical display almost of what the performance has been. You can share the results with the students also in an easier way. So make use of all these testing tools. When it comes to effective teaching, it is a good thing to digitalize all your teaching materials. So far we've probably been using material handwritten notes or handouts that we have. So it would now is the right time to start making it all into digital form, convert it into PDFs or make videos out of it, make short PPTs. Please remember that videos and PPTs should be short to be actually meaningful to students. Use some jokes somewhere, use a few cartoons, keep it short, less than 12 minutes, because that is the maximum attention span that actually students have. You can create a database of whatever links or resources you have used for every chapter. Now, this is important because often we go to different websites or web pages to gather information, and then later you will not remember from where you actually got it. So it is good. Of course, you must attribute the appropriate site for the information in your notes or whatever you are giving to your students, because we don't want to be encouraging plagiarism. But please make sure that you have a database of this chapter wise, so that the next time you need to hand out this material to students, you are not at a loss and you don't have to go and search all over again. Then there is also this concept for the practical aspect, called as virtual laboratories. There are certain platforms where you get to simulate the laboratory experiments. Of course, these are not available for all subjects, but you could check out a few options that I've heard of, I've put them on here. There's something called Chem Collective, which is mostly for the chemistry part. Labster, virtual physiology, which is from the anatomy physiology point of view, and there's something called Lab on Laptop. So these are all certain virtual laboratories. You could make use, explore these options and see if they fit your requirement. And some of them are free and some of them are paid. If your institution agrees to go for the paid version, maybe you could have a sharing between different departments and you could work something out so that students get to actually experience that simulated environment for the laboratory work. Then another option is to do an actual AV recording of laboratory work yourself. Like we have some places, if the lockdown has been lifted and teachers are going occasionally to the college like we are, then you could have a system where you will perform, take help from other faculty, from the attenders and technicians, perform the experiment and have somebody record that, and that can be sent to the students. Of course, again, as I mentioned before, this will help us in teaching the practical. It may not help our students in learning the skill because they will not learn it unless they actually do it themselves. But to some extent, at least, it will help us overcome this problem that we are facing with the practical aspects. And another suggestion I have is that we must try and collect online feedback from students for our own improvement. Whether we were doing it before or not, but now we have a method because you can use Google Forms. Many times students are not forthright and honest when we ask them to tell us, who's saying what. But if you create a form and you say anonymously, you can give me feedback, it will be a good exercise for us to know what students think of our teaching, how we need to improve, what are the areas for improvement. You can design your questions in such a way that you get actual, valuable feedback, which will help you grow as a teacher also. So all these aspects that I talked about, they were about how to be a good teacher, how to teach well, how to do your job well in this new sudden atmosphere that we find ourselves in. Now I want to talk about some other aspect which is equally important. Now suddenly we find ourselves in a situation where we don't know whether we are working for home or we are working from home, because in the process of working from home, our boundaries are all overlapping. In fact, there is no boundary at all. Everything has become one fluid thing. There are times you will be doing some work and suddenly you will rush to take a class, and in between the class you may have to do something else. Your kids will be calling you, or your wife or husband will be calling you. So this was one of the memes that was shared, even I think by Anand Mahindra himself, where work from home expectation versus reality is something totally different. I couldn't find a picture with a lady cooking, which is the more likely scenario. But anyway, let us hope that this also is holding true in some homes. So we have to learn to balance. There was this humorous joke I found. You need to set boundaries. Like a mother, for example, if you have kids who are young and they don't know that you're doing something different, suddenly a change for them. All the time, mother is at home, but then there are times when she says, no, I have to do this, I have to do that, and she disappears. So you need to find and structure your days. So what are the ways in which we can go about actually maintaining some kind of a work-life balance in these difficult times? So I have here a few tips for us all to move from a state of distress to de-stress. So first, very important thing is define a time frame for your work and your home, for your professional work, for your teaching work, and your home work, and set definite schedules for every aspect of your professional work. What will happen is, if you don't have a schedule like this, you are likely to end up finding that you have not done either part of the jobs properly. Perhaps your college is very strict and they're going to monitor you. In some cases, they may not be monitoring you very strictly. But whatever be the outcome, ultimately the role you have to play is you have to get your work done. You have to complete your number of classes and finish whatever you set out to do. So having a defined time frame is a good thing to do. I would suggest that the best thing to do would be, whatever is your working day. If your working day is from 10 to 5 in the college, please try and get into your teaching room or teaching area by 10 in the morning. Do one session of intense work from 10 to say 12 or 12:30, and do another session from 2 to 5, and make sure you do justice to that time frame which you are used to working. During those times, make sure that you don't have interruptions. Sometimes this may be a little difficult for people around us to get used to, because they think you are at home. Oh, and as it is, quite a few people have this idea about the teaching profession, that it's all a very relaxed and laid back kind of lifestyle. And people say, what is this? Oh, you're only a teacher. you don't really have deadlines and targets like we software people do or other professions do. But that's a myth, and that is quite getting blown away by this whole online teaching scenario. So we need our family members, try and get them to understand what is the change that you're facing and get their support. If you have smaller children, you may need some kind of a support system, get your in-laws, your parents, somebody to help around, so that you have a better structured work timings. So when you structure your time, please make sure that you're giving equal time for preparing for the class, conducting or delivering the class, and also for whatever evaluations you have to do. So having a definite time frame will help you to overcome a lot of the stress that you face. Okay? Now, the second problem is that a lot of us tend to get digitally distracted. Now, if I'm online to take a class, I will always have a tendency to look at whatever WhatsApp notification came on my phone, or if there's something, some new thing that popped up on my Facebook page, or there was something that came up on my Twitter timeline. So getting involved or sucked into those things, I may not do them when I'm taking the class, but once my class is over, it's a very strong temptation. You're already online, so you just browse through those things. And what you said, you will just look for 2 minutes, will easily turn out to be some 20 minutes, and your time would have just gone away. So make sure you avoid digital distractions. And the third thing, most importantly, is that these are difficult times. Now, we are not only facing the stress of having transition to online teaching, we are also facing the stress of having had to, deal with the whole unpredictability of situations around us, the social conditions around us, the tension or the anxiety about the disease itself and whether it will spread and how we are going to avoid, how are we going to cope. We may also have issues like financial issues sometimes, when if somebody in the family has been taken off the job or has had a pay cut or things like this, or many times a lot of us have not, we are not used to spending so much time together as a family because everybody goes out to work, children go to school. Now everybody is at home all the time, so we find that friction tends to rise. So it is good for us to be aware that yes, there is a cause for stress. Find out what is the cause of your stress and try to deal with that, and make a practice of adopting certain techniques which will help you to stay calm and grounded. The best one would be deep breathing. Just focus on your breath for 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes at night and 10 minutes in the middle of your day, and you will find that you are growing much calmer. Certain types of meditation also you can try so that you stay calm and grounded. And if after doing all this also you find that you're having too much of stress and you feel that it is taking a toll on you, please seek help or guidance from somebody who can counsel you or somebody who can give you some guidelines on how to cope in a better way. From the student's point of view, I request you all to kindly be approachable to students. See, just like we have been thrown into a new situation, they have also been thrown into a new situation. Their anxiety levels are also pretty high. I'm sure those of you who have had a close relationship with your students, you may have noticed that all the time students are worried now. What is going to happen about the exams? How will we come back? Those who've gone out of station, they're worried how we will come back. What will be our quarantine status? Why? When will the exams be? What are you going to do about internals? So there are a lot of anxieties around exams. There may be some people who don't have familiarity with the technology that has to be used. They may not even have a smartphone. There are few students like that, so they will have stress. Whatever study material we are sending them, we may have sent them PDFs and they will look at it in their phone. But can you imagine studying all the subjects all the time on the phone only? In fact, just the other day, some students were telling me that they are not able to go out and take printouts because either the stores are closed, they are in some remote rural areas, the printer store is closed, or there is one guy who is open who's charging 20 rupees per page. So these are the kind of issues that they may be facing. Another important area is that isolation related. Students, that age group, particularly these teenagers and young adults, they need lot of interaction and activity with their own peers. So when they are under lockdown and not allowed to move out, they are having a lot of issues which are because they are deprived of the company of their friends. So that can lead to stress. And finally, many of them may be having home issues. There may be some financial problem in the house. There may be some other kind of a problem in their house. So we must keep all these in mind. Now, I don't say that all students are all the time having only problems. Of course, we do understand that there are a few students who will try to play naughty and say that they couldn't attend the class, they didn't have connectivity, when it was not actually an issue. There are a percentage of that. I don't say no. We must be aware of those also. But let us keep an open mind and be approachable, so that if they have some kind of a stress, they will approach us and they will talk to us, and we can give them some guidance, or maybe at the most we can just say a few words of comfort, so that they don't feel so anxious, or their tension goes away a little bit at least. Why I'm saying all this is because we don't realize it often, but the role of a teacher is a very important one. We think that as professional teachers at the undergraduate level or postgraduate level, we think that our role is restricted only to doing the syllabus and ensuring that they get good marks and maybe have good placements. But that's not all. I want to give you an example of a simple experiment that was done by a scientist called Robert Rosenthal in the early 1900s. What he did was he selected a few students and tested their IQ. Then he told the teachers who were teaching these students that the tests predicted that the IQ of these students would increase over time. So when the teachers were told that, they naturally were primed to think that, okay, now these students' IQ is going to increase. Now, this Rosenthal and team followed the performance of those students for the next 2 years. And once they did that, they found to their surprise that the IQ actually increased. Now, if you look back at what they told the teachers, there is no way that there can be a significant increase in IQ over time. Maybe the way of learning and other things will change, but IQ does not significantly change like that. So what the scientists did was actually they just uh, planted an idea into the teacher's brain. And then they asked the teachers, they took feedback from them. They asked them, what did you do with these students? The feedback that the teachers gave, they said that they encouraged the children more. They gave them more time to answer questions. They smiled more often at the students, and they gave more detailed feedback of performance to the students. These were the factors which encouraged the children so much that actually they noticed an increase in the IQ. So what does this tell us? It tells us that whether in the conventional role as chalk and board teachers, or in our new role as online avatars that we have got, we continue to be important in the life of our students. Whether they acknowledge it or not, whether they say thank you to us or not, whether they even realize it or not, we have a role to play in their lives. And we must make sure that we try and play this role. It is difficult, no doubt. It takes a lot of effort from our side. It requires a lot of emotional reserves from our side as a teacher. But we must remember that good teachers are the ones who are like lamps. They always burn to light the way for others. So remembering this, it is important for us to take all these factors into consideration. So I hope that whatever I have discussed today, I told you first about what was the change that took place due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Later, I told you the results of the survey about how teachers are coping and how they've made a actually great and unimaginable kind of transition from conventional teaching to online teaching. And then I gave you a few suggestions for how you can improve your teaching outcomes, how you can improve learning for the students, how you can keep your life and work in balance, and how you can deal with your students' anxieties. And I'm ending now with this message saying that please remember that your role as a teacher is important. Whether COVID-19 is there, it is not there. Whether the pandemic continues to continue or it goes away, whatever it may be, we must remember that our role has continued to be the same, and we must do it with full dedication. I'd like to thank you and say namaskar once more. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'd like to thank Dr. P. Shanmugasundaram, who is the director of Vistar. I'd like to thank Dr. M. Vijayanandi for her initiative. And most importantly, thank you to Ramchandran, who proposed my name for this seminar. If you have anybody, I'd also like to thank my principal, Dr. D. Narsim Reddy, who's been such an encouragement and support to me throughout in whatever activities I have undertaken. If anybody has any queries, you are most welcome to write to me at anuranganathan31@gmail.com.